Hey y'all, Scott here. Did you know you can make any video game an exclusive? See, Scrabble for PSP may have also been on the DS, but now it's exclusive to our lore and testing.
How do you get people to want your video game console? Blackmail and exclusive games. Console exclusives are what makes the world go around. Why somebody would actually fathom buying a Nintendo Switch. You can only buy this thing on this hardware. Easy to understand, hard to stomach. But it's an important element of the video game industry, and without it, I'd only need one system, and the lack of a fire hazard worries me. Well, back in the early days of video game consoles, exclusives, while important, weren't deal breakers. No shark, no deal. Half the time, competing studios would just copy another console's exclusive to put on their own. You can't blame them because the Intellivision's exclusive games consisted of basketball compared to Atari's basketball. Now, when Nintendo hit the scene with the NES, that really changed the game and showcased how lucrative having games only available on your console was. You not only had games developed by Nintendo themselves, which why would they put those on other systems? That's disgusting. You had the third-party games, which many of the most popular were made exclusive to Nintendo's platforms. This wasn't just because Nintendo was the only real option for them. I mean, not even if they were drunk, but also because the third parties couldn't go anywhere else even if they tried. Nintendo held a monopoly on them, saying if you make games for us, you can't make games for the other guys. Which is why the Sega Master System lacked confidence. You ever get told to just be yourself? Don't. A handful of games released on different platforms back then, but the big heavy hitters like Castlevania, Mega Man, Dragon Quest, these largely stayed exclusive to Nintendo's platforms for a while, outside of the oddball personal computer versions. Ugh. Nintendo's grip on console exclusive games made the original Nintendo Entertainment System so damn popular and basically the only option. If you wanted a video game console, you wanted a Nintendo. As time went on though, this practice obviously became outdated. Companies were able to release their games wherever they wanted, and we received far more multi-platform games releasing on multiple consoles owned by multiple different companies. Everybody gets Pac-Man 2 because human rights. But that just forced each console manufacturer to put that much more effort into their own in-house exclusives. On the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, both Sega and Nintendo were firing at all cylinders to make their consoles look as appealing as possible. They'd often work towards offering experiences that weren't possible on other systems. Sega created the Sega Cd add-on for the Genesis, which could utilize CD quality sound and full motion video. Nintendo developed chips to pop into their Super Nintendo cartridges that could do all kinds of crazy 3D graphics and effects, but those multi-plat games, well, those could be special too. Sometimes they would basically be the same across both consoles, but many times each version was developed by different people and were completely different games. And even when they were similar, sometimes one console's version had more content or slightly different content. Mortal Kombat on SNES may have looked and played better than the Sega Genesis version, but that version wasn't as heavily censored, and thus it was far more popular. These historic moments in gaming defined how console exclusives were treated for decades to come. Not only were they about exclusive games, they were about what was exclusively in the games. 60 minutes of exclusive content. What, are the loading screens different?
Console exclusives turn us into animals. Like, it's humane for me to buy a PlayStation when I already own an Xbox, just to play a game that could run on Xbox, it just chooses not to. You are a stubborn little aren't you? This is a highly debated topic in gaming, whether or not console exclusives are good for the environment. On one hand, it increases competition. If PlayStation puts out an amazing game exclusive to its consoles, well, that's just more incentive for Xbox to wake the hell up. How do you get more people to buy your console? You put it all into a game that is legitimately jaw-dropping, something that becomes a system seller or killer app. On the other hand, if all games were multi-platform, or we just had a console that played everything, then more games would be sold and less time spent on making the consoles better and more time spent on making just legitimately good games. Plus, it would actually allow games on the Nintendo Switch to look decent if they were played on a PC or a PlayStation 5. That looks fucked up. I can understand both sides of the argument, but let's take a look at what console exclusives are and have been over the past few decades and see exactly how we're getting all fucked over.
So, exclusive games for a console, they may be only available on certain ones because they wouldn't work on others at the time. They may be only available on certain ones because the target demographics line up and producing multiple versions of a product can be costly, so narrowing it down to one system is for the best. They may only be available on certain ones because the developer and or publisher are the ones who make the console it's on. Of course, they only care about themselves. And then sometimes they're only available unplayable on certain ones because go f yourself. Nintendo platforms easily have the most exclusive games. I mean, at this point, they practically live off of them. The NES and SNES days are over and have been for a while. Developers no longer see Nintendo consoles as the only place to put their games, or if they make games for multiple platforms, they just have to get it running on Nintendo as well. Their systems have always had setbacks ever since the Nintendo 64, quirks that made it difficult to bring multi-platform games over, thus narrowing down the amount of games on here, which in tandem makes the console less appealing, so it increases the need for exclusive games to bring that appeal right back up. If Nintendo was a person, they wouldn't live past noon. The Nintendo 64's cartridges couldn't hold as much as the competition. The GameCube's mini discs, same story. The Wii was underpowered. The Nintendo Switch is underpowered. The Wii U was malnourished. Most of the time, I'm sure developers would love to bring their games over, but it's not as easy as you think. It's not like the only reason they don't is because the development kits smell bad. Jesus. But because of this, Nintendo relies on exclusive games more than any other company, creating their own with some third-party studios supporting them as well. And because of that, many multi-platform games historically didn't sell well on Nintendo's platforms because they relied so much on exclusives. That was the reason most people bought their consoles. Who in their right mind bought Injustice on Wii U?
I said in their right mind.
I think being exclusive to a Nintendo platform gives off this vibe that all these exclusives, well, they're all part of the same family. A foster one. There's a certain feel to a Nintendo console, one that makes any game exclusive to it feel dirty on anything else. Ew. I think Nintendo's exclusive games are some of the most powerful out there. Even if their platforms are severely underpowered compared to the competition, many times they still succeed simply due to the library of Nintendo games. It doesn't matter if this console is garbage. It has Zelda, it has Mario, it has the games that you can find alternatives to on other consoles, but it's never the same. Even with all the kart racers available elsewhere, they're not Mario Kart, and customers know that. A game that's just like Mario Kart, but on PlayStation, that can only get a game so far, because it's obvious the person saying that would drop it in a heartbeat to play Mario Kart. Why doesn't Nintendo go third party and release their games on other platforms? Because of that. If people are willing to buy your hardware just for your games, most of the time just one game or one franchise, you'd be stupid to drop that old shtick. That's so much more money coming in. That creates an ongoing relationship with the customer. Nintendo really values their exclusives. Hell, they started the whole only for iconography on the Super Nintendo, really hamming it up that this is the only place that you can play Uniracers. Go on, try it elsewhere, you little bitch. Games exclusive to Nintendo platforms often have that colorful, family-friendly feel, many times whimsical and focused on level-to-level gameplay compared to cutscene-centric stories, which is why games like Sonic, Super Monkey Ball, Bomberman, Rayman, they all feel at home on Nintendo platforms. But in tandem, many series that have been around for ages, legacy franchises that got their start on Nintendo, or they were around during the NES days, series like Dragon Quest, Castlevania, Final Fantasy, Contra, Tetris, Street Fighter, these games feel very at home on Nintendo as well, and in some cases have multiple exclusive games on Nintendo, and that goes for all platforms. If a series starts out somewhere, has roots surrounding this console, chances are it's gonna stay fairly close to home. Until Child Protective Services comes by! What do you say when your child is taken away from you?
Ooh, that stings. Nintendo's exclusives mean a lot to them, which made it pretty brutal when they all went away. So that just meant they had to try that much harder to get third parties to make exclusive games on their platform. That also meant Nintendo had to publish games that they usually wouldn't publish. Games like Eternal Darkness and Geist on the GameCube were M-rated. And then you also had third-party exclusives like Resident Evil 4 and Beautiful Joe that were exclusive to GameCube, at least for a little bit. Nowadays, Nintendo gets all kinds of exclusives, so they still feel most at home when they're max PG-13. That doesn't mean M-rated games aren't ever exclusive to Nintendo platforms, just not nearly as much as the other guys. But Nintendo publishes a lot of games, a huge variety to make them exclusive on their platforms. Games like DC Superhero Girls Teen Power, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 The Black Order, and WarioWare Get It Together. What the f is this? Most companies have a pretty good idea these days of what works on Nintendo as an exclusive and what doesn't, so if it fits the bill, it might just make the cut. Which made PlayStation hitting the scene that much more brutal. PlayStation became the foster home for many series that initially started out on Nintendo once the Nintendo 64 featured poor living conditions. You live like this? When games that were always thought to be Nintendo games jumped shipped over to PlayStation, I think that made everybody realize how much it's a good idea to
butter up third parties. Now, Sony even published Final Fantasy VII outside of Japan. This wasn't just about who made the best games, it was about who pouted the most to third parties.
Come on!
Sony entered a deal with Squaresoft to make the Final Fantasy series exclusive to PlayStation systems for a while there. Did this benefit the consumers? That was a great way to measure crotches. I have a PlayStation 2. I can play Final Fantasy X!
Good for you, keep it up.
While Sony funded a lot of their own exclusives by their own studios for the PlayStation 1 and 2, many developers and publishers came crawling to them because the other systems just didn't make sense. Thus, series like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Mega Man, Contra, Castlevania, these found a new home on PlayStation. With a good chunk of Nintendo's X exclusives, you'd think Sony would stop there, but they did the smartest thing possible and pumped out their own lineup of games in addition to the Nintendo refugees. PlayStation exclusives on the PS1 and 2 were kind of funky. They were all over the place, which was a good thing. All types of releases for all different types of people. Most of Nintendo's exclusives can just boil down to platformers and adventure games. A lot of the other genres were exclusive to Japan at the time or handled by the third-party companies that jumped ship. Sony was funding and publishing platformers, kart racers, simulation racers, role-playing games, fighting games, hardcore sports titles, wacky sports titles, party games, music games. It gave the original PlayStation and PlayStation 2 such a varied exclusive library. This variety, though, made any game feel like it could be a PlayStation exclusive, while on Nintendo, it felt more like when a game was exclusive, it was welcomed into the family. A Nintendo fan is more likely to play nearly everything Nintendo publishes, while PlayStation fans have standards. I mean, these are all PlayStation IPs. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just a different feeling from Nintendo's approach. But by the time we reached the PlayStation 4 era, PlayStation exclusives finally had that distinct feel that makes an only for PlayStation game stick out. Hope you like the back and necks. Something changed with the PS4 because most of Sony's exclusives all felt like variations of The Last of Us. This was a huge critical and commercial success, so I'm sure they looked at the cinematic game with engaging and deep gameplay on top of a gripping dramatic story and said, that's our version of the Nintendo 2D platformer. Days Gone was Sony's Ziplash.
Sony would publish games that were all over the place in terms of style, genre, age rating. They weren't like Nintendo in the sense of a lot of synergy between games, but there was still a little bit, enough to make each game feel like a PlayStation game. Not a ton though. I think Sony had more variety though, but that variety meant that not a lot of PlayStation fans cared about everything exclusive to the PlayStation brand. Nintendo fans, they'll play anything. But it's kind of depressing to see just how much Sony has scaled back on focusing on those experimental titles that they released on the PS1, 2, and 3, and mainly just focus on games that are fundamentally inspired by whatever their developer Naughty Dog is releasing.
Hey, these are amazing games, and I'm not gonna fault them for doing what obviously works, though after they were so experimental with exclusive games before, it's a bit disappointing to see all their games, as quality as they are, go down a road where some of them are starting to blend in with each other, which is a sentiment I hold to Nintendo as well, which focused on 2D platformers a bit too much there. But you know who doesn't have this problem? Xbox. Because they have a whole slew of others. What kind of feel does an Xbox exclusive have? Which is why this made no sense. Xbox was a bit similar to Sony in their early days, going for as large of a variety as possible with their exclusives. Shrek. But unfortunately, most of these were just sort of one or two offs. They didn't leave much of an impression. The only one that really stuck was Halo, the system seller. This is why the Xbox is still here today. I mean, there were still some quality exclusives, but they mostly weren't anything to write home about. So Microsoft acted accordingly and just said, I don't care anymore. We're rich. Buying Rare, a studio known for their excellent Nintendo exclusives. This was a bold move, and I think it made console exclusives worse. This showed how everything can just be bought out. Why build your own teams when you can just steal somebody else's? Of course, it's not really stealing, and some studios deserve a buyout because in some cases it guarantees stability. But Nintendo, Sony, and Sega all to some extent worked on building up their own amazing development teams to create exclusives that feel like they are definitively Nintendo, definitively Sony and Sega games. Microsoft just buys pre-existing studios, and that's why this is their exclusive lineup. What? the hell is this? There's no feeling of synergy between these games. You know, that shows variety, but it's hard to really be an Xbox fan and care about more than half of their exclusives. And as things rolled on, Microsoft ended up sort of just milking the stuff that worked, and the opposite problem occurred. Now, everything looks the damn same. Just put out the stuff that worked and do a random new IP every now and then. It's always Halo, Gears of War, Forza, Halo, Gears of War, Forza, Halo, Gears of War, Forza, Super Lucky's Tale, Halo, Gears of War, Forza.
Xbox exclusives have no rhyme or reason to them. Microsoft just buys out studios or games with exclusivity deals, which, you know, sometimes buying exclusives is okay because, you know, sometimes the developer or publisher needs money, but a lot of the times they don't. Like, BioShock was exclusive to the Xbox 360 for a bit. Microsoft has been trying and trying to get an exclusive lineup that isn't just Gears of War, Halo, and Forza, but the lack of synergy between any of their exclusives does not help. When I said most PlayStation fans don't play all the exclusives on the console, that is 10 times more true about Xbox fans.
Microsoft always brags about how this is the biggest exclusive lineup of games we've ever had. Yeah, because have you seen your lineup before? The thing is, they aren't counting true exclusives here, because what happens when you don't have enough good exclusives to combat PlayStation and Nintendo? That's cheating! Something I see more and more is one of the console manufacturers just buying exclusivity rights to a third-party game. A third-party game that would most normally be on every platform, which is just dumb. There's no pride in this. It's not like, damn, it's good to be a PlayStation fan because I can play Final Fantasy VII Remake dozens of months before everybody else. Wow, you worked so hard owning a console where the company just paid to have this exclusive for a few months. Wow. Sony's been doing this a lot with the PlayStation 5. Games like Final Fantasy 16, Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, like, come on, these did not have to be exclusive to the PlayStation 5. I don't even think most people look at these as PlayStation 5 exclusive games because they're so ingrained into my mind as Square Enix and Bethesda titles, and on top of that, it's not like these games wouldn't have been made if they weren't paid by Sony. Games like Bayonetta 2 and 3 are exclusive to Nintendo platforms, and that's because without Nintendo, nobody would even think about combining Bayonetta and numbers. Street Fighter V was exclusive to PS4 and PC because without Sony helping to fund the game, there wouldn't have been a Street Fighter V, or at least at the time that it came out. So that makes sense. Rise of the Tomb Raider on Xbox One doesn't. Microsoft even started advertising Lara Croft as one of the faces of Xbox for a second there, right next to Forza car. Holy shit, it's the car from Forza! These exclusives weren't earned, they were paid for, which is mostly just a waste of money in my opinion. These games would have come out on multiple platforms, mind you, but Sony and Microsoft just buy the rights to them to say they wanted to bring this game to their consoles players because they deserve the best. They would have gotten them anyway, you jerks! All that happens is these games come to other platforms eventually anyway, so like, was it really worth it? Guess it was, because I bought Deathloop on PlayStation 5. Damn it. Timed exclusives are garbage. It's like, who wins here? You get satisfaction knowing only your kind can play Dead Rising 4 for a year until it comes to PlayStation 4? Everybody give a round of applause for these people. They own an Xbox. Xbox does a lot of these timed exclusives, but more recently they shift over to a strategy involving their exclusive games coming to PC day and date with the Xbox release. And that's something you notice across the whole industry. A shift towards embracing the PC as not a competitor, but a partner in crime. It's pretty obvious you aren't gonna pry people away from their PCs. I said people. PCs are never gonna overtake consoles because, man, half the population doesn't even know how to operate a printer. You'd think they wanna use this to play FIFA, so why not just release your games on PC as well? Xbox spearheaded this change with Sony following suit, releasing some of their games that have already done their business on PlayStation on PC. Not only is it incredibly odd to see a PlayStation franchise like Uncharted or God of War with Microsoft Windows listed as one of their platforms, but it's even stranger to see the Microsoft logo on a PlayStation game and vice versa. Microsoft started publishing a select few of their games they own on competing platforms, most notably Minecraft, and Sony owns the developer who makes MLB The Show, which finally came to Xbox in 2021. Talk about a strange series to be exclusive to a console. You're telling me the Major League Baseball equivalent to Madden and FIFA was only available on PlayStation? That's not fair! They finally wised up, and while a PlayStation-owned studio was still developing the game, MLB The Show 21 released on Xbox consoles. You kill it! Exclusives are simultaneously becoming less lucrative and more lucrative for these companies. On one hand, they're doing more releases on not only PCs, but competing consoles, though on the other, Microsoft, why did you pay for Yakuza Like a Dragon to not be on PlayStation 5 for 4 months? That's just petty.
Yeah, a lot of console exclusives feel more like dumb ways to make your customers feel better. Like, is there any real reason for this to be exclusive? Outside of giving me a reason to scream at Xbox owners?
There's still competition in the air, and it's called exclusive content. If you play Avengers on PlayStation, you get Spider-Man. What is this called? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Console exclusive content is either completely irrelevant or unbelievably unfair. Like, you're keeping one of the most popular superhero characters of all time exclusive to a certain console. Firstly, that ensures that character won't be nearly as fleshed out as he could be considering it's not on every platform. Secondly, I don't like this. A lot of Ubisoft games had a deal on PlayStation consoles where you get an hour of exclusive content. I wonder if anybody even knows what this content is half the time, and like, really? An extra hour of content? I had fun for an hour longer than you. Take that, Xbox. What about when DLC is exclusive for a limited time?
We win?
Exclusive DLC. So, first off, wow, because I made the right choice on which console to buy, I am rewarded with being able to buy something the other players aren't. Wow, impressive work, Scott. Fighting games get bad with this kind of stuff. Locking characters behind different consoles, either as timed DLC exclusives or just flat out, you can only play this character on this console. Sometimes this can be kind of cool, most notably Soul Calibur 2 on GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. Each console got an exclusive character. But you can never pit Link from the GameCube version up against Spawn from the Xbox version, or Heihachi from PS2, which that's literally what fighting games are all about, all the different matchups. Now, while there's problems with this tactic, it was still really cool to get exclusive characters via each separate platform. It really did take advantage of the fact that this game was a multi-platform game. And then Sony bought the exclusive rights to Soul Calibur 3, and that just threw that idea out the window. And sometimes it just makes the other consoles irrelevant. Street Fighter Cross Tekken had 5 characters exclusive to the PlayStation versions. Why would you even bother with the 360? Like, it's a fine way to play the game, but if you want to play a fighting game, you probably also want to play with all the different characters and be able to fight all the different characters. And then there was Mortal Kombat in 2011. Kratos was exclusive to the PlayStation. My God, Sony, what is your problem? Yeah, this stuff is cool. Like, that reveal trailer showing Kratos, that was amazing, but it just overcomplicates things and makes one version of the game almost worthless. But this is what gets people excited. This doesn't. Wow, Mario and Luigi costumes in Rayman Legends and Rocket League. Like, that's kind of cute, but to any Nintendo fan that seriously said, that's it, I know what version I'm gonna get, holy shit, man, I'm sorry. I mean, these things are pretty bare minimum stuff. Zelda items and suits and Skyrim on Switch, exclusive costumes and Super Bomberman R. But then you get the exclusive bonus levels in Shovel Knight on Xbox and PlayStation, and it's like, these are so cool, god damn it! The more I look at exactly how much goes into exclusivity rights with certain games, the more it bugs me. Like, Call of Duty isn't exclusive to any platform, yet Microsoft had the advertising rights with it, so whenever they show Call of Duty, it would be on Xbox. And then Sony took that over a few years later. It's like, what's the point? That money could go into making your own amazing exclusive, or working with a third party to get something made that normally wouldn't have been. Instead, that trademark Nintendo corner or Xbox stamp or PlayStation font means too much to these companies. Sometimes I think exclusivity can hurt. Like, the Resident Evil series was exclusive to GameCube for basically that whole generation, and because of that, not as many people played it. Rise of the Tomb Raider being on Xbox One honestly made it so not as many people really talked about it in comparison to Tomb Raider 2013. Monster Hunter Rise is awesome on Nintendo Switch, but it being an exclusive does limit its visual potential as a sequel to the PS4 and Xbox One game Monster Hunter World. I think exclusivity makes sense under various contexts. Sometimes some games only really work on one piece of hardware due to a certain controller or accessory or the amount of power necessary. Maybe you want to make a smaller game and handheld makes more sense. Maybe that's all you can afford to pick one console to develop for, so you have to make it exclusive. But when we get down to this kind of junk, it just needlessly complicates things. This is more about bragging rights than it is about selling games and consoles. It's a cheap blow to competition when these companies could be spending time actually developing amazing exclusive games, but no, let's pay Ubisoft to spit in our game!
Well, that's at least 60 minutes of fun right there.